Welcome to the 28th edition of the Vigil for Julian Assange. I'm Joe Lauria, Editor-in-Chief of Consortium News. We're having a special edition on Thursday because today was the day that Julian had a day in court in terms of the U.S. request for extradition from the United Kingdom. I wrote a piece for Consortium that I'm going to read now to give the details for those who are not up to speed of what happened today. Julian Assange had his first day in court Thursday in his fight against extradition to the United States in an historic press freedom case that could have a profound impact on the future of journalism. He was dressed in jeans and a dark jacket and a t-shirt, and Julian appeared on a video screen inside a cramped courtroom in Westminster Magistrates Court in London. He was widely quoted as saying the following: "I won't surrender to the US for doing journalism that has won many awards and protected lives." Julian, of course, was arrested on April 11 after Ecuador lifted political asylum at its embassy in London, where he had lived since June 2012. On that day, April 11, the U.S. unsealed an indictment against the publisher for conspiring with Wikileaks source Chelsea Manning to crack a password needed to hide Manning's identity. Protecting a source is a routine part of investigative journalism. The U.S. also filed a request that same day to the British government to extradite Assange to face the charges, which carry a maximum sentence of 5 years in prison. It was on Thursday that Julian first appeared in this extradition case before Judge Michael Snow. Michael Snow is the same judge that recommended a sentence of 12 months for skipping bail and called Julian a narcissist. A large group of Assange supporters gathered outside the courthouse as well as inside Court 3, where many sat on the floor for the 10-minute hearing. That's according to a report from the Daily Express in London. We're going to be joined later by Patrick Hensington of 21st Century Wire, who was at the courtroom. Now, many reporters and supporters were unable to get into the hearing room because it was moved to a smaller space. It was supposed to be in courtroom 1. And for some inexplicable reason, and maybe Patrick later can give us some insight, it was moved from courtroom 1 to a smaller courtroom 3, despite the jam of supporters and reporters who tried to get in. What happened at the end of this 10-minute hearing is that the judge decided there would be another procedural hearing on May 30th, and a substantive court date was set for June 12th. However, it is expected that this case will last much longer than June 12th. That's the day, June 12th, the U.S. faces a deadline to reveal any further charges against Assange, which the British courts must base their extradition decision. However, we had Francis Bard, international lawyer, on a couple of weeks ago, and Francis said that there is a rule of specialty that's in the extradition treaty between the UK and the US, which means the US could ask Britain to waive that, and Britain could send Julian to the US on the charges that exist, just these flimsy 5-year maximum sentence charge of supposedly entering a government computer when, as I said, Julian was only trying to protect his source by helping Chelsea Manning get a password. If the rule of specialty is waived, he could be extradited on the 5-year charge, and then new charges could be laid on him once he gets to the United States, to Alexandria, Virginia, where, by the way, Chelsea is still imprisoned because she refuses to testify in a secret grand jury in which her counsel would not be present to provide more information to be used, most likely in this, what we expect to be a superseding indictment against Assange. Chelsea remains in jail, refusing to testify. And what the U.S. is weighing is charging Assange under the 1917 Espionage Act for unauthorized possession and dissemination of classified material. It would be the first time the act would be used to prosecute a journalist for receiving and publishing secret information. Edward Snowden sent this message to a pro-Assange rally in Berlin on Wednesday, quote, "It is not just a man who stands in jeopardy, but the future of the free press." Julian has already now begun serving an 11-month sentence for skipping bail that was imposed on him on Tuesday in regard to a Swedish investigation of sexual abuse allegations that was already dropped last year. Wikileaks tweeted about that sentence. Julian Assange's sentence is as shocking as it is vindictive. We have grave concerns as to whether he will receive a fair extradition hearing in the UK. After today's extradition hearing concluded, Jennifer Hrafnsson, Julian's lawyer in London, spoke to the press. She said the following.
Today was the first procedural hearing for the extradition proceedings, a process that started back in 2010 when the Obama administration opened the criminal investigation into Wikileaks and Julian Assange. That investigation has been pursued aggressively by the Trump administration ever since. Despite what you heard from the prosecutor in the courtroom today, this case is not about hacking. This case is about a journalist and a publisher who had conversations with a source about accessing material, encouraged that source to provide material, and spoke to that source about how to protect their identity. This is protected activity that journalists engage in all the time, and any prosecution and extradition of Mr. Assange for having done so, or alleged to have done so, will place a massive chill on investigative journalism the world over. On World Press Freedom Day, it's important that we consider the free speech ramifications of this case and what it means for journalists and media organisations everywhere. We also need to remember that Chelsea Manning, the alleged source of Wikileaks materials, is in prison in the US despite having had her sentence commuted, being held in contempt of court for refusing to give further testimony about Wikileaks, and is going to be held indefinitely until she gives that evidence, in the context where the US is seeking to perfect and potentially add to its extradition request. No democratic nation ought to behave this way. As he said today in the hearing, he will not consent to extradition, and he will be fighting it because of his concern about the free speech implications that are raised by this case and by the US's attempt to indict him and prosecute him and extradite him. This sets a terrible precedent and a chilling precedent for all journalists, and for that reason he'll be fighting it.
Kristinn Hrafnsson, the editor-in-chief of Wikileaks, then followed Jennifer Hrafnsson to the microphone outside the Magistrates Court and said the following.
In today's newspapers in the UK, there is a discussion about a leak and about the firing of a cabinet minister for leaking information. There's discussion of whether he had done it, whether it was right of him to do it, etc., etc. What I did not see in today's newspaper was any discussion about the fundamental right of the newspaper to publish the information. That is unquestionable. Was there any discussion that the editor of the Telegraph should join Mr. Assange in Belmarsh prison? Of course not. It's absurd. We are worried about Julian Assange. We are hearing that the situation in Belmarsh prison, in Her Majesty's prison, is appalling because of austerity and cutbacks. For the last weeks since he was arrested, he has spent 23 out of 24 hours a day in his cell, most of the time. That is what we call in general terms solitary confinement. That's unacceptable, and that applies to most of the prisoners in that appalling facility. It is unacceptable that a publisher is spending time in that prison. The fight has just begun. It will be a long one and a hard one, but we count on the general public to understand the importance of this case, and we will fight till victory. Thank you.